Okay, when I began thinking about Pastor Heather's request to talk about food for the journey, and I reflected, I got very excited because I began to realize that in my life there has been a banquet feast placed in front of me for food for my spiritual journey, and I am so blessed and so grateful. I believe my journey began when I was about 7 years old. I have this very strong memory of walking in my neighborhood on the south side of Chicago when that was safe to do as a 7-year-old. And out of the blue, looking up at the sky, that's where God is, right? And thinking to myself, there has got to be more to this than just this. That's all the thoughts were. I had no other words for it as a 7-year-old, but I had a really deep feeling that there was more to life than what we were experiencing. So I had a very varied adult life. My first husband was when we met, he was in seminary to become a Lutheran minister. So I followed him along that path. He accepted, that's what brought me to Albany, because his home church was First Lutheran. And he accepted a call to a little struggling congregation out in Guilderland Center after he was ordained. When we were at the church in Guilderland Center, it was the late 60s. And my husband's passion was the social injustices of the time. So that was the anti-war movement, ecumenicalism, racism was coming, and integration was on the plate then. So he only lasted a year. We only lasted a year in Guilderland Center. We moved into the city of Albany, where he became a street minister. It was an incredibly exciting time to live in Albany and be a young person. We were in our 20s. I didn't return, when we came to Albany, I didn't return to my occupation as an elementary school teacher. Instead, I opened and ran a natural food store on Lark Street while he was doing his work in the neighborhood around here. And it was in the 60s and the 70s also. This is where I feel my question began to be answered as a 7-year-old, because the times were just full of everybody asking questions. What is this all about? There were books and workshops galore that I just devoured, that took me on my spiritual journey and finding out who I was. And the more I devoured it, the hungrier I felt. So I kept up everything that came down the road. I participated in. So my first husband and our marriage ended. And several years later, my second husband was Jewish. And this path took me to become a member of Temple Beth Emeth. And our first daughter celebrated her bat mitzvah at Beth Emeth. And I fell in love with the Jewish faith. It had an earthiness that I did not experience in Christianity. And there was always a holiday to celebrate that embraced nature. And I would find myself at Friday evening services, loving to sing the Shema, which, if I can remember it, Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, means, oh, hear Israel, God is to be praised, God is one, God is ours, So that was very fulfilling. However, sometime during that marriage, I felt a call to seek out my Christian roots again, and that's when I came to Westminster in the 80s sometime. A couple of my children, two younger children, actually experienced church school here and services here for a while. But I hate to say it, but I did not feel fed. So I stopped coming to church, and I pursued the avenues, modalities that I, again, found in the New Age movement. And this was profound for me. I found God in everything and everywhere I went. I went to England. I visited sacred sites and did ceremony in England and Scotland and France. I found myself in Ravensbrück, Germany, with Buddhists chanting, healing for the land that previously in World War II was a concentration camp for men, for women and children. I ended up in Bosnia on a peace mission, including women from around the world, where we went to test out the Dayton Accord. It was a challenging trip, to say the least. I have done sacred trips to Egypt, at the great sites in Egypt, the great spiritual, the pyramids, etc. I've done the same in Peru, at Machu Picchu. They were never tourist trips. They were always about seeking and finding God and finding myself, where I fit in the whole thing. So it's been an amazing journey, and I have been so fed graciously. But my last journey of significance was to India. So a friend of mine, a mentor in fact, had taken a trip to India where she participated in a 21-day retreat. And she came back telling us about it, and I said, I felt drawn, so I signed up and I went. And it's called the Oneness Movement at the Oneness University. Now, you have to understand, this particular university in India was not like SUNY Albany. So it was this particular retreat, we were requested to be in silence, 21 days. Just the students. I actually enjoyed that experience. It was a time where I could reflect on the teachings of the day and think about what was going on in me and feel my experiences, integrate things if possible. And it was challenging. Not the silence was not challenging, but the teachings were challenging. In the Oneness Movement, it's all about relationship. So we spent the first week taking through processes where we delved into our relationships from birth till the present, from our parents, ourselves, our siblings, anybody we were connected to, and to God. After 7 days, I remember thinking, oh my God, there's 2 more weeks. I don't know if I can manage this. However, when I returned home, I would briefly explain the experience to people as it was the deepest and most intense therapy I have ever done, while all the time being held in the hands of God. And I realize I really want to say also to members of Westminster that since I have returned, I did return to the church, obviously, and I have found ways to be fed. I have particularly been fed by Dave McMillan's Bible study. I think I drive him nuts sometimes. I want to know what the source of the translation was. What was the original Aramaic, Dave? And by Paul Randalls, when he was offering us classes, I always participated in those. And I mean, I'm hungry for that kind of process in my life, and I feel enormously fed, and I'm so grateful for all that I have.